What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the TCG Empire YouTube channel. Today I am here with Zach, as you can see right above me. He is in the top right corner. Today we are going to be going over the Raging Surf main set translations. So this will most likely be the first half of the set for Paradox Rift, which is what we get in November. But according to Japan, this is their own set. So we're going to be going over all of the cards from here. And then when Paradox Rift gets fully released, if the cards are shown that we've talked about today, then, we'll just skip over those and go over the rest. But before we get right into it, Zach, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing really good. I had a pretty good day today. I'm a little tired right now, but, I'm sure some good old Pokemon will wake me up.
Yep, nothing like looking at scans and making the brain think. So,
Yeah.
let's hop right into full screen mode real quick, just so you guys don't have to worry about anything else. And let's get right into this. So the first card that we have is the Frostless EX. It is a Terra. We haven't seen any new Terra abilities, so this one is still the same. That as long as it's on your bench, you prevent all damage. And it has the ability, just out of reach, when it's KO'd, you flip a coin, and if heads, your opponent takes one less prize card. For that knockout, which, I mean, it could be, something that's decent, but as far as the attack with doing 140 and then a 20 snipe, how do you feel about that, Zach?
So overall, I do think this card is kind of underpowered because, best case scenario, you flip a heads and you're essentially a 250 HP one prizer that's doing 140 for two. And that, in comparison to other one prizers, is kind of subpar nowadays. Like, the HP is obviously very good, but the attack is really subpar for a one prizer. So I almost would have liked to have seen the ability be more like feigning spell, almost, where you just take them down with you. But I do kind of think it's interesting that now water as a type has access to playing water Pokemon, fire Pokemon with the Terra Ice and grass Pokemon now with the Terra Frostless. So you're gaining a lot of coverage by, using water energies as like an accelerant with Baxcalibur.
Yeah, I mean, and you and I kind of talked about it a little bit. Frostless isn't going to be really one-shotting anything, and if you want to take down a Charizard with this, I mean, it does give you the ability to do so where you don't have to dump 6 energy on a Chinchou. You can slap the dark-type gloves on here and hit for 340, and I mean, I guess you get the added benefit of sniping 20. So, but overall, I don't really think it's going to be too impactful. I mean, maybe if, Charizard keeps doing its thing and Chinchou just struggles against it, but I feel like once Chinchou gets set up, it's kind of game over anyways, because they just do so much damage and can control, your prize output and things like that. So, but the Frostless, I think right now I'm gonna leave that in the binder.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm gonna sleeve it up just yet. And really quick, I forgot to mention, Zach came up with a really unique name instead of Slider Sleeve, and I can't remember what it was.
I honestly can't either.
All right, then I guess we're sticking with the segment of Slider Sleeve, but or Slider Pass, slide it into a sleeve or pass it on to the next person.
Yeah, was it bulk or binder?
Maybe it might have been bulk or binder. You know what? I like bulk and binder. So I mean, it's either gonna be put in the bind. What was the translation with it though? Was it like if it's in the bulk, that means we're not using it?
Yeah, and then binder means it could be, trade bait, it could be, meta competitive, it could be in a deck immediately, but it is it's a card that when you see it at a pre-release, you're picking it up and you're sliding it into your binder for safekeeping.
All right, so how do we feel about this Frostless then? The bulk right now?
I mean, it is an ultra rare. It is an alternative typing for a deck. Me personally, I'm probably putting it into the binder at first, but I would not be surprised if it ends up in the bulk.
That's fair. But enough with the Frostless. Let's hop right into this Lapras. Now, I did mention when we were talking about these scans, when they first came out, that this Lapras could actually be a really cool inclusion into Chimpao Baxcalibur, just because if you ever run into a situation where, you can't pivot yourself into finding a superior energy retrieval, or you've used them all, I feel like the Into the Deep, being able to put 3 back into your hand, even if they get shuffled into the deck, like that means that you're guaranteeing energy to be found with something like Chimpao. So Water Freeze or Freeze Dry isn't really going to be that useful unless you hit heads, and maybe it can buy you a turn. But how do you feel as Lapras being like a one-of support, just in case, Lord forbid we have another Seismitoad reprint and we can't use superior energy retrievals?
So the funny thing is, I actually like this Lapras as an option for the opposite reason. I like it because Freeze Dry has the potential of being like that paralysis kind of thing, like we've seen with the Articuno. Granted, the Articuno is guaranteed right now, but it will probably be rotating. And then the Into the Deep is kind of like that extra option that you have. So it's like, I feel like, the Freeze Dry makes it somewhat considerable, and then the Into the Deep kind of solidifies it as potentially being an option.
That's fair. I think I'd probably pick up 1 or 2 of these and put them in the binder.
For sure.
Next is just the Remoraid. It's just a 1 of retreat. Now it does the Remoraid that it's single strike play, is it 60 or 70 HP?
It has 60.
So would you play this Remoraid?
Yes, you would, because 9 times out of 10, the Remoraid being Rapid Strike right now doesn't matter, because it would only matter if you're either searching it with Artillery or you're retreating it with Tower of Waters. And the Tower of Waters interaction could come up if you like start the Remoraid, so that way you don't have to like dedicate your turn attachment to retreating the Remoraid. But I could very well see that extra 10 HP being more optimal than carrying that Rapid Strike tag.
Yeah, especially if like you run into a Turbo Lost Box that just goes Turbo and they turn 2 Sableye you. Like having 70 versus 60 makes a big difference. So I do like the Remoraid. What do you think of the Octillery? I think Smoke Bomb is pretty cool, with being able to force your opponent to have to flip. But then again, if they retreat, it resets. So,
it's obviously not the strongest kind of effect on a Pokemon, but we have seen very important matchups come down to stuff like this, because obviously you do have the benefit of like retreating out of this kind of effect and resetting it, but then if you can't get that Pokemon back into the active, then this Octillery kind of did its job. So it's not really like the worst thing, and its ability too, when you evolve you get to draw 3 cards. So like maybe this becomes like a 1 of in Rapid Strike that needs to build up its hand.
That could be good.
Maybe you go like turn 1, you get double Remoraid just to be safe, and one of them doesn't get knocked out. Well, now you have the option to evolve into this Octillery, get some extra cards, and then use the other one to search for stuff. Will that happen?
Probably not.
But is it an option? Yeah.
It definitely is. We'll go through all of the cards and then we'll talk about which ones we would slide or we would bulk or binder, just to make it a little bit more fluid. But next we have the Snow Run, just basic 60 HP. It kind of is cool that it does 40 damage if it's attacking a fighting type Pokemon. So
I believe this is fire.
No, it's fighting. The symbol's fighting.
Is it?
Yeah.
Wow, that's weird. Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, you're just gonna be playing the Snow Run to evolve into Frostless if you do. So that card, I mean, I don't really think there's much to say about it. Do you think there is?
No, I mean, fighting type basics might be a little bit more relevant with the Garchomp that we're about to talk about next. So maybe that 40 damage ends up being relevant at some point, but it's just gonna be an evolution.
This Garchomp, I think, is trash. It's not gonna see play. It's terrible. Said no one ever. If they just look at the card, this thing is amazing.
This card is so good.
So it does have a Terra with the factor of you can't hit it on the bench. but it also has Hydrolander, which does 160 damage for 1 energy, and then you attach up to 3 fighting energy from your discard pile to your bench Pokemon in any way you like. I don't think we've ever seen a big energy acceleration attack for 1 energy that does this much damage. Do you think so?
I mean, not even, like, not only that, but it also lets you split it.
Yeah.
So, like, if you compare this to something like Pikachu and Zekrom tag team, all 3 of the energies you accelerated had to go to the same Pokemon. This, literally, you could put 1, 1, and 1 for 1 energy, and you're doing 160 damage. And you can search out this card with Irida.
Yep.
Which is ridiculous. You can literally Rare Candy Irida. That's ridiculous.
Simply because it has this typing and it's blue.
Yeah, and we didn't even mention the second attack yet.
Yeah, so Sonic Dive for 2 colorless, you discard 2 energy from this Pokemon, and it does 120 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Now, I do have one question. If you use this attack and then discard the double turbo, do you do 100 or do you do 120?
If I remember correctly, the damage reduction is still in effect because you're resolving the attack, which is both doing damage and discarding the energy at the same time. So
okay.
It considers the energy to still be attached.
Either way though, you get the ability to hit hard. You can hit Hydrolander 160, and then if they retreat, you can snipe 120, so it's going to be busted. And the other factor of this big shark boy is the fact it has no retreat. That is just like fantastic as a card. I think that this is going to be meta defining. I think it'll be amazing until Irida rotates, then it might be knocked down a little bit, but for the time being where we do have Irida in format, being able to search a rare candy and the Garchomp, it means that you pretty much just need 1 energy in your hand. And if you already have the rare candy, then congrats, you can search for an energy search and a Garchomp, or, if you already have the energy search, go the opposite combo. Either way, though, I think this deck is going to be phenomenal and fun at the same time. The only issue being, it is weak to lightning, so things like Miraidon will give it a tough time. But
so that was actually something I wanted to touch on, is given the fact that you have to play fighting energies for this, it means you get free reign to play fighting type attackers,
that
right?
Is fair.
So you're incidentally synergizing with being able to counter your counter.
Yeah, that's fair. You know what else is fun? The fact that you can play, instead of maybe Urshi Intel, if you just play Garchomp Urshi. Because, if you hit 160 on 2 and then just 120, 120, there's 280 on the board on 2 different Mons.
Yeah, and not to mention the Garchomp itself can clean up some damage too.
Yeah.
With its own sniping attack.
So, this Garchomp definitely is going to see play. And as you mentioned, you can run the factors of being able to swing for the weakness if you run into Miraidon or something. Yeah, maybe by the time this comes out, maybe there'll be something like the old Terrakion, where if something was knocked out.
Oh yeah, retaliate.
Yeah, the retaliate into Darkrai plays. Maybe you can do, retaliate into Raikou plays. So
yeah.
Next we have the Mantike. For no energy, fluffy healing, you heal 120 from one of your bench Pokemon. Has no retreat, weak to lightning, 30 HP. How do you think this fares in something like Skeleturge?
It might be an interesting thing to consider once rotation hits, because we will be losing Cheryl most likely. So, just having this little one prizer that for no energy can not fully heal, but, half heal a Skeleturge is really, really interesting. I also think it's interesting that there's no Mantine in this set. There's just Mantike.
Well, there could be in the English scans for Paradox Rift.
That is true. I think there's some significance about this printing. I think this is one of the first printings this card has had in years.
Yeah. It's nice though that a lot of the baby cards are getting good treatment as far as having no colorless attacks and all that. let's see. On to the Palkia, 130 HP, 130 HP, 1 prizer, basic. Teleportation burst, 30 damage. You can switch this Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. And then for a water and 2 colorless, it does prize count 80. And then if you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent, it does 80 more. So 160 for 3. It's not good. I don't think that that's going to be played really at all.
I think it would only be played if there's like some big thing that's like weak to water that this thing could easily one shot and kind of give you that prize trade tempo back.
Yeah.
But we currently don't have that. So I kind of agree that this card seems very lackluster at this point in time.
Yeah. Next we have the Windpod. So Windpod has a water attack, 70 HP. Flip a coin. If heads during your opponent's next turn, prevent all damage from and effects of attacks done to this Pokemon. Then for a water and a colorless does 20. So you do have the potential to be able to flip heads and prevent, damage from something like Sableye or Cramorant. So you could buy yourself a turn, but really it's just to be able to evolve into Golisopod. And it seems like this Golisopod is really just a Tinkaton counter at that point. But at the same time, Tinkaton player needs to have a ton of cards in their hand, which they probably will, but they're not really going to have enough for you to one-shot. What do they need? At least 17 cards?
15. Because Tinkaton only has 300.
Okay, so they need 15 cards. So what was the math on that? If you have 15, you can hit them for 300.
You're hitting for 450. Yeah, so the Golisopod can hit Tinkaton for 300, but then the Tinkaton is hitting for 450.
Yeah, so do what you want with that. This Golisopod, though, it's mediocre. Next, we have Dondozo, and I'll get into why I wish this card was better, but we have Replenishing Gulp for a single colorless. You look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose any basic energy, and attach them to this Pokemon, and then you shuffle the others into your deck. And then we have a water and 4 colorless Hydro Splash for 180 damage. I really wish that this card was better. At the time of getting big whale Pokemon as, basics or stage 1s and stuff, usually they had higher HP. So I feel like something like this Dondozo should have had something around the lines of like, 200, 220 HP, just because it allows you to potentially work, within the format, be a one prizer that's kind of tanky. It gives us something kind of like Stallback or how old Whale Lord was and stuff. But I feel like they just missed out on an opportunity with only giving this thing 160 HP, and the attacks and damage aren't really relevant at all.
Yeah, this card is honestly pretty bad.
And next we have the Chinchou. So Chinchou, for a colorless Illuminate, you look at the top card of your deck, you can put it back on the deck or put it to the bottom of your deck. And then for Tiny Charge, 20 damage. This could be something that might be kind of useful if, something comes up with Sander and he finds a way to just manipulate your deck the whole time. You can look at the card that he put up there and throw it to the bottom or keep it on the top, but
yeah.
Either way, this Chinchou ain't doing much. And into the Lantern, 2 colorless, 50 damage, and then 2 lightning and a colorless Aqua Spark. If it has any water energy attached, it does 200 total. So, Zach, what do you think about this card, considering, Lantern Prime is one of your favorite cards?
I think this card is actually really interesting for something like Zorobox, because the Phantom Transformation Zoroark deck has shifted away from, like, double turbo and luminous energy builds to more reversal energy builds. So, if you have a reversal energy on this, you're hitting 200, which... anything that's weak to electric, you're gonna be one-shotting because that's, 400 damage. But we do currently have really good options as lightning-type attackers for that Zorobox deck specifically. So maybe this sees play, depending on, like, maybe what the rotation might be or, stuff like that. But I think that might be the only place where something like this can really thrive.
Yeah, I agree with that. Next we have the +1 Minot, and I actually really like these cards. Simply put, because you can tech them if you want to. If, getting in the topic of Tech Tuesday, I haven't done one in a while, but, you know, if you're playing something like Miraidon and you're really struggling against Chim-Pao, definitely tech this Plusle and Minun, simply put, because this Plusle, while it doesn't seem like much, it amplifies the Minun, and that's what makes it work. So, the Plusle does 10 plus 10 for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon, and we've seen attacks like this in the past kind of do well. The only issue is that it is too colorless, so if you want to attack in one turn, you have to hope to hit generators, or you're running DTEs, which, you know, makes you basically minus 20 and then plus 10 for each. But the Minun is a lot of fun, simply put, because with Buddy Pulls, if you have the Plusle in play, whenever your opponent attaches an energy to one of their Pokemon, you put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. So you can't stack the Minuns to where you have 4 Minuns in play and then your opponent's taking 8 damage for each energy. They can only take 2 at a time, but this does stack when your opponent is trying to build a board. And the fact that this Minun doesn't have to be in the active, it can just be on the board, means that you can apply pressure with things like Raikou, and then you can also punish your opponent for attaching energy. And it doesn't even have to be for decks that, you know, attach multiple energy a turn from their hand. Even just sometimes a simple energy counts as, you know, putting some damage and can amplify the effects that it can cause. You know, if your opponent attaches 1 energy and then attacks you, that technically makes it to where your Raikou, if you both have a full bench, is hitting 240 rather than 220, because you got that free 20 damage out of the way. So, Zach, what do you think of these two?
I think they're decent, especially considering the fact that one Miraidon can grab both halves of this, which is really interesting. However, I'm probably currently overthinking this, but the Minun has me asking a very interesting question, because Buddy Pulse says whenever you attach an energy, not an energy card, and previously that wording has mattered on things, you know, like considering damage for, like, you know, double colorless energy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So again, I'm probably reading into this, but I'm curious, if you attach something like reversal energy, are you taking 6 damage counters, or are you still only taking 2?
I feel like, oh, that's an interesting question. Or something like Urshi, where they attach, you know, a double rapid energy.
Yeah, because again, I'm 100% like probably reading into it, but that's like a very interesting thing that I would personally get clarification on.
Yeah.
Just because that's like really important, especially if you're dedicating the spots to running this combo. You want to be able to get as much damage out of these things as you can.
Not to mention, this Minun against Guardy would mean like, oh yeah, reversal, there's 6 damage. Now you can't, you know, you can
Yeah,
accelerate 3. So that's something to definitely check on, and if that's how it works, then this Minun just gets even better. Next we have Joltik. We have Flare around 10 times damage, flip 3 coins, does 10 for each. Not good, you have 40 HP. And then the Galvantula, Electro Bullet, 50 damage and 30 to one of your opponent's bench. I mean, it could be a little fun gimmicky, but that's really all it is gimmicky. Do you have anything to say on those two?
No, I just wish we would get a Galvantula that was as good as the one from Steam Siege, I believe. That was electric and grass, and it hit 30-30, but it also applied weakness, so you could like double snipe Froakies.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever gonna get something like that again.
Like, that was the only time Galvantula was ever relevant, and it was actually really good.
Next we have Zekrom. So we have Short Crash, 20 damage. Before doing damage, you discard all tools from your opponent's active. Not too good. I mean, maybe if Reverum and Electrode in 151 actually sees play, this could be kind of cool, but I don't think it's going to be too well. And then Raging Thunder, 130 damage. This attack does 40 damage to one of your bench Pokemon. Again, we've seen things like Zekrom have attacks like this, or, you know, in the meta, they need to be paired with something good, like, you know, Reuniclus back in prime time, when you would use Earthquake with Donphan and then power up your own Zekroms for Zekrom or Reshiram in order to use Outrage. Like, that was good, but in instances like this, I don't think it's going to be any good. The only thing you'll use it for is Shorting Crash. Again, just to discard tools off of Reverum, but that's pretty much it. Zach, I'm going to let you talk about this Tapu Coco.
So real briefly before I get on the Tapu Coco, I'm noticing a pattern with cards in this set. There is a lot of damage spread.
Yeah.
Like the Minun stacks up damage counters, the Zekrom does bench sniping, the Garchomp does bench sniping, the Frostless does bench sniping.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious to see where like the underlying synergy is within the whole set and why they're focusing so much on that.
Yeah, that'll definitely be something that's interesting. It's always fun to see like unique patterns that go with it, but at the same time, when there's a toxic pattern that goes with it, then you're in trouble. So hopefully it's not one of those things.
Yeah, but anyways, back to the Tapu Koko. I think this card is actually really decent because for a lightning and a colorless, it does 30 damage, and then if any of your Pokemon were knocked out by damage from an attack during your opponent's last turn, you'll do an additional 90, and then your opponent's active is now paralyzed. And
Terrakion
as
on
we,
crack.
yeah, I was say as we've seen in metas past over the past couple years, paralysis is something that when it can be abused will literally steal you games, and this is not only giving you guaranteed paralysis, but it's also hitting 120 damage, which is nothing to scoff at for that kind of. So like you're doing 120 and paralyzing, so that's almost guaranteeing that you're going to be able to take a two shot on a two prizer, which is really good because this is very clearly a comeback card, so you want comeback cards to give you that kind of tempo.
Yeah.
Um,
The
and
Coco
then
art is weird though. He looks like a chicken.
yeah, it does look really weird.
My man's like
Um,
head looks like a chicken gizzard.
yeah, they definitely could have done the artwork a little bit better.
But anyways, into Extreme Current, you do 180 damage and then discard one. So not too bad, not too good either. I mean, with things like Flaffy and having Dynamotor, it definitely is something where like, you can have a consistent damage and there's no drawback except for discarding the energy. So, if you want something in Miraidon that can, kind of attack every turn, but, it's not like Raikou where the damage is based on how many Pokemon are on the board, or Miraidon where, you have to find a way to retreat and get back into it the next turn. The only thing you have to worry about with this Tapu Koko is that it's only doing 180, but it can also paralyze if something was knocked out. So I think this would be super solid against Urshi in Lost Box, or not in Lost Box, in Miraidon, simply put, because, they can get that turn 2 rapid flow, and if you can paralyze them for a turn, that's, you take away their chances of trying to get 3 prizes.
Yeah, especially since that most rapid lists nowadays are only playing the one switching out. So if you either A, force them to burn it early, or B, force them to find it, you could easily steal a turn from them.
Yep. Let's see. Next, we're going to get into the Gimme Ghoul. So, the first Gimme Ghoul, call for family, search your deck for a basic Pokemon, put it onto your bench, then shuffle your deck. And then for 2 energy, it does 70 damage. Or, whoa, wait. For 2 energy, it does 20 damage. My apologies. And, this Gimme Ghoul is not good. We've seen call for families in the past in formats that, were okay, where call for family, search for 2 basics and put them under your hand. So I'm not too sure why they only allowed 1 here. Probably for the aspect of, being able to evolve into the Goldango. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
So you do have this Gimme Ghoul, but the most optimal one is probably going to be the 70 HP one, just because it means that you're not going to be having a field day as a Lost Box player with this. So for a single colorless continuous coin toss, 20 damage. You flip a coin until you get tails, and it does 20 for each heads. Now, I'm just waiting for the day when someone flips 15 heads to win a game, simply put, because they just keep getting heads. I think it'll be interesting. The only issue that you do need to realize is that the first Gimme Ghoul with 50 HP does have 1 retreat, whereas the Gimme Ghoul with 70 has 2. So, again, it might be something like Guardy, where, you play those splits, or, it really depends on what you're going for. We've seen things like Chinchou backs play, a 2-1 split of the Frigibacks, just because while 2 of them have, a 1 retreat and less HP, one of them has more HP, so that way you're not really in a bad spot with Lost Box. So
Mm-hmm.
the only issue and thing that sucks is that with the, Frigibaxes, if you have the 70 HP and the 60 HP, it means that Sableye can't KO both of them. But if you have one Gimme Ghoul and another Gimme Ghoul and one's 50 and one's 70, that's still 12 damage counters.
Yep.
That's so sad. Let's see. Next, we'll go into the fighting types. We're about halfway through, so not too bad. The Gligar, Toxic, your opponent's active is Poison. You put 2 damage counters. Could be pretty cool, but again, it's all just really for this Gliscor. Single colorless, you do 40 damage. And then for 3 colorless, 80 damage, flip a coin. If head, your opponent's active Pokemon is now Poison, and you put 2 damage counters instead of 1. Not too good. If you're hitting for weakness, you're only hitting for 180 with Poison amplified, so not too good. Next, we have Fanfi. 2 colorless energy, strength, 30 damage. And then for some unknown reason, this Fanfi has Rolling Tackle for 2 fighting, a colorless, and it does 60 damage. It's a tanky elephant right there. And next on to the tankier elephants. You have Cragalanche on Donphan, 30 damage, discard the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck. And then for 2 fighting and a colorless, 160. And during your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon can't attack. So, Zach, do you think those are going to get played at all?
If the Donphan was a basic, I could see it, but it's not looking good for our rolling elephants.
Next we have Groudon. So Groudon could be kind of cool. We've seen, sometimes there being, colorless attributes that, being able to accelerate a basic fighting energy or just any energy from your hand could be kind of cool, but that's really all you're going to have it for, is just for extra momentum. Again, you do have things like Koraidon that can do the same and end your turn just like attacking. And then you have Magma Purge 60x. You discard the top 4, you discard up to 4 energy from your Pokemon and it does 60 for each. The fact that you can only discard 4, I think, is what limits this from actually being good.
Yeah, this is the obvious, synergy with the Garchomp. You discard, accelerate, but it's too much of an investment for not quite enough damage, and the fact that you have to rotate attacks rather than, just being able to excel the fighting energies via an ability.
Yeah,
means that particular style of deck is definitely not going to succeed.
And next we have the Gibble and the Garchomp. So the Gibble has 20 damage for a fighting, and it does have 70 HP, which is nice. And then we have the Gabite with 100 damage and 100 HP, and for a single fighting, it does 50 damage, and then you discard an energy. So that 50 could be relevant, and actually having 100 HP is, somewhat decent in this format. Again, not too decent because Cramorant is still KOing you. And most of the time, you'll want to Irida into the Garchomp, and that's what your single fighting attack will be, because you'll hit for 160. Zach, do you have anything to say about these Gibbles or Gabites?
I think they did them okay.
I think Expanded will be broken with Dragon Call. Oh wait, no, because you only search for Dragon types. Never mind.
Yeah.
Next we have Hoopa EX. Again, a Terra type, so no damage on the bench. And for 2 dark, it does 50 damage times the amount of energy attached to all of your opponent's Pokemon in play. So this can actually be super good against something like Miraidon. They stack a lot of energy. You're hitting for weakness. You have 220 HP. Means that if you don't put a 5th bench Pokemon, a Raikou is not going to be able to KO you, which means, Miraidon's going to have to KO you, but they have to stack 3 energy, so it's pretty good. And then for 3 dark, you do Scoundrel Fist, 200 damage, and then you can't use Scoundrel Fist during your next turn. So, Zach, what do you think of this? Since, it's your favorite Pokemon that you somehow forget anytime it's brought
up. This definitely could have been interesting in something like Darkrai, but the fact that you can't Dark Patch to this is really awkward, and the fact that all of its attacks require dark energies, like there's not a single colorless attack requirement in here, means that this card while it's cute, is going to be very hard to actually use efficiently.
Yeah, that's the only drawback. Let's see. Going into the Minior, I like this cute little guy. Minior ability, Flying Meteor. Once during your turn, if it's on your bench, you attach an energy from your hand to it. You can switch it to your active, and then Gravity Tackle 20x. It's 20 more damage for each colorless in your opponent's active Pokemon's retreat cost. This is really just in here to counter block Snorlax paired with Alakazam, I feel like.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you see it could be hitting hard?
No, I mean, it's interesting that, its ability is basically a built-in jet energy for it, but it's like, I feel like its attack could have been slightly more synergistic. Like, we had a Golisopod GX that, required you to keep switching it in and out of the active to do more damage. So, like, it just seems like a weird pairing for something like this Minior where you attach, you throw it into the active, and you're only going to be doing a lot of damage against very specific things.
Yeah.
But then, even if, like, this ends up living and you put it back on the bench, you're hardly ever incentivized to put in another energy on this to reactivate its ability again, because its attack has nothing to do with more energy.
I think it would only be good if it had a 1 retreat cost. Then it could be good into something like, playing it with Urshi so that way you can continuously hit 150 every turn. But having to retreat means that, you can't just pop it to the active then retreat it. That'd be kind of nice if we had a built-in rush-in feature.
I mean, we do have Beach Court.
I mean, yeah, we do. So that could be nice.
Like, you would attach, go to the active, and then the Beach Court would require that you only have to discard the energy. So, like, it's not necessarily the most efficient thing, but
yeah.
Give me 1 second really quick, sorry.
All is well. I'll go through the next couple of cards here really quick for you guys. So, so we do have the Cloth. With the Cloth, for 2 energy, it does Hysterical Scissors 30+. And if you are affected by a special condition, you do 160 more damage. So for 2 energy, on a basic, you're hitting 190. And then for 2 fighting, you're doing 80 damage. And then you are now burned. So, Zach, I know you talked about this card a little bit. What do you think of it?
I know that there's a lot of people excited to pair this with the Brute Bonnet from the Paradox set. I don't remember exactly what it does, but I know its ability inflicts status conditions of some sort under some, circumstances. I don't know what that is off the top of my head. But, being able to attach a DTE to this and, hit for 170 after the damage reduction, and then, say you are afflicted by poison, it'll be 180, and then if you have, like, the Hisuian Sneasler, it'll be 200, which on a 1-prizer is really good.
That is good. Wait, I thought Sneasler added 2.
Oh, so it'd be 210. Or, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so it'd be 200.
Yeah.
Okay, next on to the Flamigo. This card isn't really good. If only it had the United Wings attack and made, United Wings be able to have a fighting type attacker, it'd be kind of nice, but overall, not doing too much. Next we have the Ghastly line. So Ghastly, a lure, colorless, draw a card, and then you have not double colorless, a dark and a colorless. Will-O-Wisp 20 damage. I'm surprised that it doesn't burn, considering what Will-O-Wisp is.
Yeah.
Then we have the Haunter, Dark Slumber for a dark and a colorless, 40 damage. Your opponent's active is now asleep, so that's pretty cool. And then the Gengar ability, once during your turn, you may switch your active Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon. So, that's pretty unique, but it is on a stage 2, so it's probably not going to be played too much. And then you have Nightmare for 100 damage, and your opponent's active Pokemon is now asleep. Do you see that line really being played?
No, not really. I mean, the Gengar having a built-in, switch once per turn is really cool, but there's really nothing that you're going to use to probably make efficient use out of it because it is a stage 2.
Mm-hmm.
However, if we go back a little bit, I did want to touch on something about the Flamigo really quick.
Of course.
So one thing to keep in mind whenever we get new Flamigos is that the United Wings one searches any Flamigo. So if this Flamigo's second attack was 2 colorless energies, this actually could have been a pretty decent tech attacker that you could use double turbos with, because this would be able to hit something like Arceus V-Star for quite a lot of damage. Um, Now, is it worth giving up 20 damage from a United Wings? Maybe, maybe not, but against something like Arc, you're already not taking a one shot anyways, so why not kind of give yourself that out?
Yeah, it definitely could be good. Again, the fighting, the one fighting makes it kind of awkward. Then you can't. It's not like we could play something like what's the energy? I always forget.
Luminous energy.
Luminous. You can't attach to Luminous. So, let's see. Sorry, just responding to this really
the
quick.
Absol.
Yeah. Let's see. So onto the Absol. So you have Draw Sense. You may discard any number of cards from your hand, and then you draw cards until you have 5 in hand. So a little bit of good, hand replenishment, but I don't think it's going to be too useful. And then for 2 colorless, 20 plus, and if you have any tool attached, you do 80 damage total. So the Absol kind of mediocre. The Draw Sense could be kind of cool, if you're kind of in a dead hand, but again, you having to discard resources at that point just to try and fulfill, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Next we have the Scraggy. So low kick, 10 damage, and then 2 dark and a colorless, 50 damage. Again, not too great. And then we have the Beating for 30 damage. If your opponent's active Pokemon is a basic, it can't attack during your opponent's next turn. And then for 2 dark and a colorless, 130. You and I have talked about this before. The wording on Beating is a bit unique because usually it says, if your opponent's active Pokemon is a basic, it can't, like, that basic Pokemon can't attack, or, the Pokemon that you hit can't attack the defending. Like, okay, hold on. If the defending,
there you go.
If the defending Pokemon is an
is a basic Pokemon.
If the defending Pokemon is a basic Pokemon, it can't attack during your opponent's next turn. And usually when it says defending Pokemon, it means that the Pokemon that the attack hit. But considering this says if your opponent's active Pokemon is a basic, it can't attack. We're going to have to figure that out, but you actually might be able to just wall Lost Box at that point. That was difficult for me.
I would have to say that it probably does work the same. They're just changing the wording because, at the time you're doing the attack, it's checking to see if the active is a basic. But I very well could see it being like a lingering effect that applies to the active spot rather than the Pokemon currently in it.
That's fair. Next, we have the Yveltal. Crosscut, 30 damage. If your opponent's active Pokemon is an evolution, it does 60 more. And then for 2 dark and a colorless, Dark Edge, 120, and you discard an energy from this Pokemon. I don't think it's going to see too much play. Crosscut could be good, but at the same time, it's not too great unless you're hitting for weakness. So, I don't know. How do you feel about it? Just keep in mind we are at around 45 minutes, and we still have quite a bit of cards to go through.
I think this card is ever so slightly too low on its damage output. If it was doing a little bit more, you might have been able to use this as like a Mew VMAX counter, but I think it's just a little too out of range.
And let's see, next we have the Nickit, surprise attack, 30 damage, flip a coin of tails, does nothing. And then you have the Thievel ability, Sneak Snatch. Once during your turn, when you play this card to evolve one of your Pokemon, you can look at your opponent's hand, choose 2 energy you find there, and have your opponent shuffle them into their deck. Could be pretty good with something like control based and being able to shuffle energy back against things like not Greninja, but against things like Chinchou, if they don't have a Chinchou in the active, or being able to do something like put energy back in the deck for Guardy so they can't actually discard them. Could be pretty good, but due to being a stage 1, I don't think it's going to be too played. How do you feel?
I agree 100%. It's a unique ability, but it probably will not see play.
And next we have the final card that will destroy Lost Box, hopefully, because Lost Box is a terrible deck. Jirachi, basic Pokemon. Abilities, Stellar Veil. Attacks from your opponent's basic Pokemon can't put damage counters on your benched Pokemon. So, this ability means that you cannot be pinged by Sableye, except for your active Pokemon. Your active Pokemon can still get pinged, but I think that this Jirachi is going to be fantastic. It's kind of the essence of Espeon and Toedscruel put together, but it's on a basic, and you don't have to have energy attached. And, charge energy can actually be useful, finding some energy in case you're trying to just thin the deck. So, I think that this card will be played in Gardevoir because it will heavily improve the Lost Box matchup. What do you think of this Jirachi, though? Because you're the one that told me about it initially.
I think this card is absolutely insane.
Insane in the membrane.
It's obviously not super foolproof because you will still most likely need to put the Manaphy down as well, just so that way Greninja can't take care of it. But if you have Jirachi and Manaphy established, then your entire deck, minus your active, I guess, your entire bench is protected from, what makes Lost Box one of the most dominant decks in the format right now. So you're basically boiling Lost Box into a attack the active kind of deck, and that is not where that strategy thrives. So I think combining or just adding this Jirachi into our format that's so heavily dominated by Lost Box is just perfect.
Not to mention too, a quick thing with the Jirachi inside of Guardy. It actually makes the Guardy mirror a lot more awkward because your opponent can't use Cresselia to place damage onto your bench. So that means that if they want to kill a Kirlia, they need to boss it to the active and then hit it. But at that point, they're probably not going to use Cress anyways, but it definitely is something to keep in mind.
Man, can you imagine if the Jirachi was psychic instead of metal?
That would have been great. But hey, you can still search for 2 psychic energy.
Oh yeah, you just would have been able to excel to it and grab it with Fog Crystal too.
Yeah, that's probably why they didn't, but you can still grab it with Level Ball.
Yeah.
Next we have Ferrothorn, metal and a colorless, 30 damage, not too great. And then you have the Ferrothorn. Wait, what?
Ferroseed and Ferrothorn.
Okay, I was so confused.
Oh, it does say Ferrothorn. Yeah.
Okay.
Ferroseed is the basic.
Okay, Ferroseed is the one that does 30 damage. Then you have Ferrothorn. Ability, solid body. It takes 30 less damage. And then Spinning Needle, 50 damage. If you use Spinning Needle during your next turn, it does 150 total. Not too great. The minus 30 is okay, I guess. Gives you 170, but we're in a format where that number is not hard to hit at all.
Yeah.
Next we have the Onedge or Honedge. Cut up 20 damage, and then you have the Dual Blade, which does 20 damage for slash, and then Slashing Strike, 80 damage during your next turn. It can't use Slashing Strike. And then we're finally into a fun Aegislash. We haven't seen an Aegislash like this in a long time. Last one was, I believe, Phantom Forces, and it was on a EX. So Sacred Shield, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon from your opponent's Pokemon EX and Pokemon V. Super solid. And then the metal and the colorless, 120 damage, and it's basically Shred. The only thing to keep in mind is this is a stage 2, so it can be kind of awkward to deal with, but, against certain decks, this just walls them out. If you played this against Arctura, Umbreon, and just got this out, there's nothing that they well, okay, correction, Duraludon can get through it, but if you play this against something like Arctina, there's nothing that they can do. Is there?
They could Star Requiem if they got enough in the Lost Zone, I guess.
Yeah, but that's that's the only thing.
Yeah.
But this is pretty good. Could you imagine if we had Canceling Cologne back when Sigilif and Aegislash and everything was a thing?
Yeah, but we had the much more toxic Hex Maniac.
Yeah, that's fair. Next we have Zacian basic, Iron Howl, 30 damage, attach a basic metal energy from your discard to one of your bench Pokemon. So just seeing some more energy acceleration, and then for 2 metal and a colorless, 130. during your next turn, this Pokemon can't attack. Again, pretty lackluster. Then we have the Orthworm. Hit and draw, 20 damage, draw 2 cards, so some energy, some draw potential there. And then for a metal and 2 colorless, if there are 3 or less cards remaining in your deck, you hit for 240 damage, so it could be a pretty good bomb closer, but it's not gonna be too good. Next we have Goldango. This card will shape the format, simply put because bonus coins is broken. Once during your turn, you may draw 1 card. If this Pokemon's in your active spot, you can draw 2 cards instead. So if you have 4 Goldango out, this means you get to draw 4 additional cards a turn. We've seen how good draw support is. And it also has the Make It Rain attack, 50 damage. You discard any number of basic energy from your hands. And this attack does 50 damage for each energy discarded this way, basically. So, Zach, what do you think of this, considering, Toad Puff was a thing, and now we have Goldango Puff?
I think the Goldango is really good. This card could be good enough to actually warrant playing that Gengar line if you really wanted to, just so that way you can try and draw a bunch of cards and get a bunch of energy in your hand.
Which Gengar?
The dark one that we just read about a few Pokemon ago, the one that has the built-in switch.
Oh, yes, that's right.
But Goldango, if you really think about it, actually could be a pretty good deck, because at least for right now, we still have the Eldegoss that lets you grab 2 basic energies. So if you have 1 or 2 Eldegoss set up, you can grab up to 4 energies, and then you can use your Goldangos to draw more cards. So a deck like that could very easily thin a bunch of cards out of the deck, and then you just play a bunch of energy recyclers.
Yeah, and especially, a deck, an attack like this, it doesn't warrant you needing to attach the energies, so, your whole engine can be based around drawing your deck rather than having to find cards to attach, like Baxcalibur, for instance, so I feel like it's super solid. Next, we have the Bombardier EX. Fast carry. If you go first, you can use this attack on your first turn. You search your deck for up to 3 basic Pokemon, put them onto your bench, then shuffle your deck. And then for 3 colorless, Shadow Wind, 130 damage. You may shuffle this Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your deck. You're not really going to use it for the second attack. You're mainly going to use it for the first attack. Fast carry is a very, very good card, or good attack, especially in something like Guardy and something like Lost Box. It means that if you don't see the Battle VIP pass, you're still not behind. It means that if you can get this out, get it to the active, you find a way to be able to kind of warrant a way to, stay in the game. I feel like this card is something where if you're forced to go first and you don't have Battle VIP passes, it is just as good as your opponent being able to support her for a Battle VIP pass. So it kind of keeps you in the loop, and it rewards you for, the fact that you're going first, and doesn't punish you with not being able to play a supporter. Instead, you get to play in a Pokemon that doesn't attack, that really sets up your board, so coming into your next turn, you're ready to evolve anyways.
Yeah, I really wish that it was a a no energy attack, because you're heavily incentivized to use this going first. And going first, you can't use a supporter, so you're basically forced to find an efficient way to pivot into this if you grab it off of something like Nest Ball, which oftentimes could be using your energy attachment. So while the effect is very good, I don't think it was good enough to limit it that much. However, I do like the fact that they kind of recycled their old mentality of useful support Pokemon being able to get themselves out of dodge. So you can use this turn 1, and then if you can facilitate it somewhere in the mid game, or turn 2 or whatever, being able to shuffle it away and take that liability off the board is super, super nice.
Yeah. And next we have the Cyclozar. Cyclozar, 30 damage, nothing beneficial really. And then Buddy Driving, 70 damage. If you played a supporter card from your hand, you do 140 total. Not too good for 3 energy. We've seen better. Next, we'll get into the trainers. So We do have a Rare Candy reprint. Again, we know what Rare Candy does. We have a Switch reprint as well. And then we have the Gorgeous Mantle. So if this Pokemon this card is attached to does not have a rule box, it gets plus 100 HP, and when it's knocked out, your opponent takes one more prize card with it for it. So what do you think of this card, Zach, in something like Gardevoir?
I was gonna say this card is really interesting. We've had a card that did the reverse of this. It was both Victory Medal, I believe, and Island Challenge Amulet. And the amulet is actually banned, fun fact. So we used to have it to where you would lose 100 HP and give up one less prize. So now that we have the inverse of gaining the HP and becoming worth more prizes, is really, really cool. I mean, it does let the Shining Arcana Gardevoir hit those bigger numbers. So you can more because you would only really need to hit those super, super big numbers against usually VMAXs, which are worth 3 prizes. So being able to put this on, and yeah, you're going to give up an extra prize, but you're still going to be ahead in the prize trade, is actually really good. So I very much so could see, and you could also, like, you may not want to, but you could prematurely put this on something like Kirlia, so that way it can't get sniped by like a Sableye or a Greninja, and then you are basically forced to evolve it into the Shining Arcana one. Or you could actually even evolve it into the EX, and then the tool does nothing. So
yeah,
there's
that's true.
a lot of technical play with it.
The other thing that's nice to think about too is the fact that Arcana would go to 230, which means that you would be able to accelerate up to 11 energy to it if you wanted to, meaning that you would hit for 390 damage if there was a world where you needed to.
Yeah.
So, next we have the TM Turbo Energize. We've seen Turbo Energize before, but for a colorless, you search your deck for 2 basic energies, attach them to your basic Pokemon in any way you like. Zach, what do you think of this?
So I think the TM mechanic overall is actually really interesting. And then just to clarify for everyone who, may not know, even though it does kind of say it on the screen, the TMs are very unique tools that, like the seal stones that we have, grant the Pokemon that are attached to the ability to use this attack. However, unlike the seal stones, the TMs get discarded at the end of the turn. So if we ever got something, God forbid, like Garbotoxin Garbodor again, you could put these on Garb to activate Garbotoxin, and then it would shut off the ability. Granted, you'd be shutting off only your abilities, but you never know. Like, you could use that to attack into something like with Safeguard or something just for the turn,
Yeah.
So it's very niche, but something like that is cool. But then also just allowing any Pokemon to, for 1 energy, attach 2 energies. And it can be split. I think this card is very good, especially considering that we have, Town Store?
That searches for tools.
Yeah, the stadium that searches for tools. So we're just getting a lot of consistency cards, and I am all for it.
Next, we have the TM Machine Blindside. Again, this is a tool card that you'll attach, and then it gets discarded at the end of your turn. So for 3 energy, you do 100 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon that has any damage counters on it. So it could be a good way to clean up, but again, Manaphy does prevent this from actually working on the bench, so just keep that in mind. I don't think there's too much we really got to say about this one. Next, we have Larry. So Larry is a supporter. You flip a coin if heads. You search your deck for up to 2 Pokemon and put them into your hand. If tails, you search your deck for a basic Pokemon and put it into your hand. This supporter is definitely something that is lackluster, but in the right deck, it could be good. Depending on what you're playing, you could play this inside of something like Lugia, for instance. Being able to search for 2 Pokemon, or just a basic, capturing Aroma is a thing, but sometimes, if you don't want to play the item and you want to play a supporter, or you don't open them, you can Luminion for this, which means that it gives you the ability to, search any 2 Pokemon, which means that you can grab a Lugia, and if you have an energy, you can attach, and then the second Pokemon you grab be a Archeops, so that way you can read the wind it. Zach, what do you think of this?
I think this card is very interesting because it is basically capturing Aroma in supporter form, but they changed the heads upside to now grabbing any 2 Pokemon rather than, maybe being 2 evolutions or just the 1 evolution in the case of Evolution Incense. So I think that transition from item to supporter is very good. I think it's very balanced the way that they transitioned it, and I could very well see this card being splashed, or even maybe a staple post rotation, depending on what the rotation looks like.
Next we have Chantel. Flip a coin. If heads, you switch one of your opponent's active Pokemon with their bench, basically. And if tails, you switch your active with one of your bench. So it's basically an escape rope if you hit tails, a Pokemon catcher if you hit heads. But on a supporter, I don't think it's going to be very played too much. We only have a couple cards left. So Zach, what do you think of this?
It's interesting. Like you said, heads, it's basically boss's orders. Tails, it's switch. So I would have preferred if this was an item. This would have been a very playable item, but as a supporter, you can only play one per turn. I don't think it's that good.
Next we have Rika. Look at the top 4 cards of your deck, and you put 2 of them into your hand, and then you shuffle the rest and put them on the bottom of your deck. This is okay, in my eyes at least. I don't like the aspect of putting them to the bottom of your deck, but at the same time, if they're useless cards, and you know that they're at the bottom, then that's fine. I think it'll be a splash supporter, but I don't think it'll be a heavily played supporter.
I think if this card saw 5 like Chorus, it would be 100% better.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Then like obviously Lost Box would still play Chorus, but like in all those decks that are playing Chorus as just a consistency card, I think Rika only like seeing that one less card is very important. But in decks like Arc and or Lugia, this could be really interesting because if you see something like your energies, you guaranteed can put them on the bottom of your deck so that way you can excel them. Whereas with Chorus, you're losing the energies permanently.
Yeah. And then we have Parasol Lady. You shuffle your hand into your deck and draw 4 cards. If you go second and it's your first turn, you draw until you have 8 instead. It could be kind of cute, but considering the fact it's only a shuffle draw 4 unless you use it on your first turn, I don't really think it's going to be too playable. Is there anything you think about it?
I wish it was just Lily again. Draw until you have 6. If it's your first turn, draw until you have 8 instead. It would have been much more playable, but in this current incarnation, it's just really not that good.
And then finally, we have the Medical Energy. As long as this Pokemon is attached to as long as this card is attached to a Pokemon, it provides a colorless energy. And then when you attach it from your hand to one of your Pokemon, you heal 30 damage. Could be kind of cool, but again, it's not going to be too, played. Maybe in Lugia, but then again, Lugia accelerates it from the deck, so it's not, it might be a one-of, kind of like how Jet Energy is in Lugia, but
yeah,
that's about it. And then next we just have the Illustrator rares, the best looking one being the Garchomp. So
I think the Minior is the best one.
The Minior? I mean,
look at the Minior. That Minior is gorgeous. Garchomp is just kind of chilling in like a water bubble. But
I mean,
the
yeah,
Minior
but
has the meteor shower with all of the other colors.
That just looks like Teletubbies and rainbows had babies.
And that's a problem.
Okay, that's fair. But with that
also,
being said,
the Groudon artwork is also pretty good. But.
That's fair. All right, you want to run through real quick, talk about what will binder, or do you think they got the gist of it?
I think we can spare you guys the agony of running through this one more time, even if it is going to be speedy. I think you're able to kind of get the gist of what
Garchomp and Goldango, definitely go for those.
Yeah, Garchomp, Goldango, definitely the main headliners, and then there's some like maybe playable cards amongst the rest, but other than that, the set's nothing really too special.
But again, as mentioned on here by PokeBeach, they are expecting Raging Surf to be introduced and incorporated into Paradox Rift. So this means we could have another 60-something cards to look at here soon. So Paradox Rift not fully out yet, but when that is, I'll be sure to get the video recorded. Zach will be on here with me. But overall, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video. If you did enjoy it, do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications. Thank you so much to Zach for being here. The man, the myth, the legend himself.
Always a great time when I can hop on and talk with you guys.
And with that being said, again, thank you guys for everything, and I will catch you guys in tomorrow's very first 151 video. I don't have any more to say, so with that being said, I'll see you guys soon. Later.